Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Izuku Yagi had a secret quirk part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story 𝗕𝗏𝗄 from Wattpad. So let's start the video. Our story starts when two twins named Izuku Yagi and Izumi Yagi on their 4th birthday, where they wake up and then look at each other and shout in unity, "We get our quirks today." Both then giggle and run down to find their parents sitting there at the table. 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 Yagi was in his normal self, which we see in his school years. Here is a photo. Not my art, the credit goes to the artist. Not my art, the credit goes to the artist. They both go up to him and hug his legs while saying, "Can we go? The quirk doctor now please." 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 sighs and looks over to his wife 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 Yagi pro hero Emerald, which she looks back at him with a smile and nods. Then 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 lifts the two kids up with each arm and tells them, "Sure, let's go." Time skip to the point they arrive in the office with the doctor looking at some reports. 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 asks, "What do the reports say?" The doctor looks up and says, "I have two good news and a bad news." 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 and 𝗓𝗏𝗄 ask the doctor the good news first. The doctor then replies saying, "They both have quirks." 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 and 𝗓𝗏𝗄 sign and ask the doctor what the quirks are. The doctor says that Izumi here has a strength-enhancing quirk along with telekinesis. Meanwhile, Izuku here has a quirk so overpowered he is untouchable. Izuku quickly tells Izumi, "Wow, we can be heroes together." Izumi nods while smiling. 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 and 𝗓𝗏𝗄 smile while looking at their kids, but then asks what is Izuku's quirk. The doctor says, "He has two quirks which are different from the both of you. His quirk goes hand to hand like butter and jam. His first quirk is called the 6 eyes. It will cause his eyes to turn sea blue. When the quirk awakens, it allows Izuku to see past illusion, objects, and also giving him ability to know whatever he wants. These eyes also protect his brain from his other quirk called infinity. The infinity allows Izuku to bring the concept of infinity to reality. He can cast a barrier around himself with this, which makes him immune to anything by creating infinite space between himself and something else. He can also use this to become invisible by creating infinite space only for the reflected light, which normally will bounce off of him and then go into our eye, but by stopping those light rays he becomes invisible." The Yagi family was shocked about how much power he has, and the parents asked if he had any more abilities. The doctor simply nodded, saying yes. He also has vast intellect. He can create a blue ball which creates a singularity type effect, basically pulling everything in one spot, and can also create a red ball which does the exact opposite of the blue. He is also immune to every quirk, as every quirk is even telekinesis uses brain waves which need to travel a distance, so he is unbeatable, unmatched. Upon that, he has a domain which he can extend. While in this domain, whoever isn't in his direct contact will see everything in the universe at once, including every single drop of water, grain of sand, the stars and the planets, everything, while he can see whatever he wants. Now I don't know if he will have other abilities, but we can only find out when his quirk activates. 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 and 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 in unison ask, "What do you mean by when it awakes?" The doctor replies saying, "That was the bad news. We don't know when it will awake. Maybe it will never awake. We have no clue." 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 looks at Izuku, who was sad hearing this, and then looked at her husband, who looked at the boy and picked him and said, "Don't worry son, you will become a hero." And the family was about to head out, but the doctor stopped them and said, "𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 and 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏. Yagi, I have to tell you that please make sure he does not become a villain." 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 and 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 just nod and leave the office. The whole time Izumi stayed away from Izuku. Meanwhile, Izuku tried to stop crying with his father, trying to console Izuku. Once they reached their home, 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 went in with Izuku in his arms and said, "Everyone get ready, we will go celebrate the two of you getting quirks." Izuku smiled at this and hopped off and went in the room with Izuku. Meanwhile, 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 told 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏, "What would we do if he stays quirkless?" 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 responded saying, "You're forgetting one for all. I was planning on giving it to him either way." 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 sighed and said, "Fine, but we need to make sure he understands this world and is not like Bakugo." 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 nodded and said, "I have an idea. You neglect him and Izumi is already jealous of him. This will open his eyes to the world, and when he gets his quirk he would not abuse them, and I will be his friend because I can't do these things to him, sorry." 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 put her hand on his cheeks and says, "I know, I will do as you say. I don't want to do this either, but this might be the best way to open his eyes to the world before he gets cocky." We now take a time skip of 5 years as the 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗏 Izumi and Izuku were waiting for All Might to arrive back home. They were all worried and soon heard a knock at the door. Izuku ran to it and opened it to see his father in a skeleton-like form, and he fell back from shock. All Might simply stepped in and sat on the chair and said, "Before you ask, the villain only hit my stomach so I can still live, nothing bad." Izuku ran up and hugged his father, crying, thinking, "I almost lost the only person who cares for me. I don't want to lose Dad. He is the only one who believed in me and told me I could become a hero." We take another time skip of 5 years till the final day of middle school, where the teacher walks in class and does the same thing as in anime. After that, Bakugo and Izumi both tell Izuku, "We know a way for you to awaken your quirk. Please tell me what it is," said Izuku. After that, Bakugo puts his hand on Izuku's shoulder as he burned it and said, "Take a swan dive off the roof and wish for a quirk that actually appears in your next life." We skip to Izuku getting chalked by the sludge villain as he hears a voice say, "Don't worry, why? Because I am here." The author skipping things be like, "I am speed." As soon as Izuku heard these words, he felt a lot of pressure around him as the sludge villain was blown away. He then looks up to see All Might standing there with his hands stretched out. As soon as Izuku heard these words, he felt a lot of pressure around him as the sludge villain was blown away. He then looks up to see All Might standing there with his hands stretched out. All Might was saying to himself, "Damn it, Izuku almost died because of me, but thank God he is okay. Good thing I trained him from time to time so he was able to hold on to his conscience long enough for me to get here." Izuku took the hand and started fanboying, asking, "Can I get your autograph?" All Might signs his notebook and says, "Here you go, young Yagi." Izuku questions All Might, saying, "How do you know my name?" All Might answers saying, "I read it in your notebook," while thinking, "Thank God dodged a big bullet right now." He then puts the villain in the bottle and says, "Well, I need to go now, bye," and he jumps off. But while in the air he realized Izuku was hanging on to him. He panics for Izuku's safety and says, "Izuku, hold on tight and close your mouth and eyes." He then lands on a roof and scolds Izuku for a good minute and then asks, "Why did you hang on to me?" Izuku replies saying, "I wanted to ask you if I could become a hero even if I don't have a quirk right now." All Might sighs, and before he could say anything, Smokes appears on him and he turns into Small Might. Izuku was shocked to see All Might turn into his dad, but before he could say anything, All Might cuts him, saying, "It's me, Izuku. I am All Might, and the injury I got 5 years ago was during a villain fight. It placed a limit on my power, at first allowing me to do hero work for 7 hours a day, but now I can only do it for 3 hours. You need to keep this a secret from everyone, okay?" Izuku nods and asks, "Does Mom know?" All Might says, "You mean Emerald Witch knows or not?" Hearing this, Izuku's eyes dart up, meeting his father's, as he says, "Mom is the Emerald Witch." Wow, didn't expect that. All Might then says, "Now as for your question, I think you know my answer, right?" Izuku looks up and just nods and says, "Let's go home, we would get late." As they were going down the stairs, All Might said, "Before going home, let's give this villain to the police," as he patted his pockets but soon realized that he dropped the villain. Izuku notices this and is panicking and tried saying something but heard an explosion from a few streets away. He and All Might ran to the source immediately, and they both saw Bakugo trapped by the sludge villain. Izuku started feeling guilt and said, "It's my fault he escaped." All Might hearing this turns to Izuku and says, "It wasn't your fault, now stay calm, I'm trying to buff up." Izuku notices his father trying but failing, but he suddenly sees something that pushes him to run inside the barrier and past the heroes. What he saw was his sister in the sludge villain. Now, he loved his sister like a lot, in a more than a sister way. Izuku then does the same move as in the anime and throws his bag at the sludge villain, hitting its eye. All Might seeing this was just impressed and forgot about buffing up and thought, "My boy, I knew you were a good person." As Izuku grew closer, his eyes started glowing blue color, and when he was close enough to the sludge villain, the villain tried hitting him but was stopped mid-air as Izuku laughed like a maniac, saying, "Finally," as he lifted his finger revealing a blue glow on it as he yelled, "Limitless blue." He then hit the villain, dispersing him and saving Bakugo and Izumi, who were at this point knocked out. Izuku carried both of them and walked to the crowd and laid them on the ground. Suddenly the heroes were about to come and scold him but were stopped by All Might, saying, "I'll handle the boy," as he jumped off grabbing Izuku. He then landed in an alleyway and reverted back to normal and tells Izuku, "My boy, you've proven yourself worthy of my power." He then explains One for All and how Izuku was so heroic that he went in quirkless and congratulated him on getting his quirk. Izuku replies saying, "As per your offer, I accept, and may I ask a question?" All Might simply nodded as Izuku asked his question, "Why does mom hate me?" All Might replied saying, "She loves you. I told her to act like she neglected you so you don't become arrogant in this world and have a pure and rational heart. I know you might be angry at me, but I did it simply because I wanted you to be a good man and learn the hardship of life." Izuku simply hugged his father and said, "No need to be sorry. Whatever you did it for a noble reason. Now let's get home so we can tell mom about this." All Might smiled and walked with Izuku saying, "You're right, let's go." They then walked in the direction of the setting sun with All Might fluffing Izuku's hair. That's the end for this part. Thanks for reading it, and I hope you all enjoyed. Last time we left off with Izuku and All Might walking home after Izuku awakened his quirk and was chosen by All Might to be his successor. Izuku looks towards All Might and says, "So when will I get the Quirk?" All Might looks over to Izuku and checks him up and down. After that says, "I think you're ready now." He said this as he plucked his hair and finished saying, "Eat this." Izuku looked up to All Might with a dead face and said, "Seriously?" All Might then replies saying, "You have to consume my DNA to inherit the quirk." Izuku then takes the hair from All Might and before eating it says, "I hope you conditioned your hair today." He then gulps the hair and almost gags saying, "It had dandruff in it." All Might just said, "I am sorry my boy." Izuku says, "Geez, fine. Let's just go home so from tomorrow we could start real training." All Might nodded and they went home. After entering the house, Izuku called out to his mom saying, "Mom, I am home." His mother replied saying, "Don't call me mom, you brat." But as she saw Izuku's blue eyes, she ran up to him and hugged him and cried into his shoulder and said, "Izuku, I only acted like that. I didn't want to do it, and I love you, my boy." Izuku embraced her and said, "No matter what, you will always be my mom, so I forgive you." After this meeting, All Might told 𝐒𝐽 about Izuku already getting one for all and how he awakened his quirk. 𝐒𝐽 smiled while crying saying he saved his sister. Oh, thank God. After that, when Izumi arrived, she went straight to her and Izuku's room and saw Izuku using his quirk to stop pens from falling on him, but after 10 seconds he couldn't do it anymore. Izumi then chuckled and said, "You have to train Oni-chan." Izuku looked back at her and almost cried as she has not called him Oni-chan for 10 years. He then wiped the tears and hugged her. She hugged back and said, "I am sorry, I only bullied you because I was jealous. Please forgive me." She finished the sentence while bowing down. Izuku put his hands on her shoulder and lifted her up saying, "It's okay, I forgive you." They then went to sleep cuddling together like some twins do. Next morning, All Might burst into the room to wake Izuku. Izuku reluctantly woke up and went to the beach with All Might there. All Might asked Izuku about his quirk. Izuku tells All Might all he knows from the eyes, and All Might then says, "I want to introduce you to someone," as he points to an empty spot. Suddenly a black-haired man jumped down from the trees with a scarf and walked up to them. Izuku instantly recognized the man as the underground hero, Eraserhead. He was excited, very excited you could say. Then All Might introduced him by saying, "This is Shoyuda Aizawa, and I think you know his hero name." Izuku nods and says, "His hero name is Eraserhead." Aizawa then speaks in his grumpy voice saying, "Good to meet you, kid. From what I heard, I know I will meet you in school, but right now I am here for only one reason, to test if your quirk is affected by mine or not. Now All Might will punch you while you try using your quirk." Izuku said, "Hi." Then get in a position and looked at All Might, who had his punch pulled back as Aizawa then activates his quirk and looks at Izuku. Then he signals All Might to go for the attack. All Might does so and is holding back so to not hit Izuku very hardly, but to all of their shocks the fist was a few inches from Izuku's face. Aizawa then deactivates his quirk and says, "You're truly something. That quirk is unmatched. There is no counter around it. Now let me explain what I mean by that." All Might and Izuku both look at Aizawa to pay attention, and after a second Aizawa speaks saying, "My quirk works kind of like an X-ray machine, but it only affects the quirk genes as long as I keep looking at them, but your quirk was able to stop my quirk rays, you could call them, from reaching you. That means that nothing can harm you as everything has some sort of energy. A punch has kinetic. Telekinesis works by using the energy waves that every brain gives out, so now you just need to work on your stamina with the quirk. How long can you hold the quirk?" Izuku responds saying, "About half a minute, but I sometimes feel a strange energy which I don't understand." All Might then whispers, "It might be one for all. Why don't you try it?" Izuku then whispers back saying, "Dad, my eyes are somewhat telling me to not use it at full power, so I kinda don't want to use it just yet." All Might then says, "Why not just lower the percentage?" Izuku then looks up with a face if had seen God himself saying, "Dad, you're an idiot but sometimes are quite smart." He then steps back and looks at the two pro and says, I don't think just focusing the power in one part of the body would be enough, I should spread it out. He does this as red veins-like thing. Appears on his body then disappear causing him, and when he finishes a gush of wind is created and All Might asks, what percentage are you using? By the way, Aizawa knows about OFA in this. As one time he was offered the quirk but declined. Izuku replies saying, about 11, I think I can still push my body to go ahead, so I'll do it. He then pushes the percentage up and maxes out at 20% and says, my max is 20% but I can push to 29 but with large amount of ache in my joints. All Might and Aizawa both are amazed at his performance. They both congratulate him. Then Aizawa says, okay kid, I will meet you in 1A, and if I don't see improvement in you, I'll expel you and everyone who doesn't show potential. Izuku just nods as Aizawa swings to go to sleep as it was 5 in the morning. Then Izuku looks at All Might and says, Dad, can I use my domain expansion on you? I promise it will only last a millisecond please. All Might sighs and says, just open and close it. Okay, I don't want to die. Izuku then puts his finger in a cross and says, domain expansion, infinite void. With that he covered himself and All Might in a sphere, and All Might saw almost all of the universe. Meanwhile, Izuku was caught off guard by seeing an onyx-haired girl sleeping peacefully on her bed, but this moment didn't last long as he had to close the void to not harm his father. Speaking of his father, he looked to see his dad knocked out on the floor holding his head. He headed over to him and picked him up and quickly ran to his home and entered to see his mom in her hero outfit and said, good luck mom. His mom said, thanks, now I must go before your sister sees me, she said as she jumped out of the window. Izuku then took his dad to his room and laid him on the bed. Then he walked to the roof and thinked about the girl he saw. He then said to himself, wow, and I thought love at first sight was bullshit. Besides, I can see her whenever I want, but I should not look at her when she's in the shower or is changing clothes, so I think I should just go and rest because I have a feeling I will die in a few days due to the training. But oh boy, was he wrong about the cause of his death. We skip over to a man in the room with life support attached to him, and he had a potato face as he spun around saying, I need you to take out a target for me. After that I will help you achieve your dreams and goals. The man said this to a figure in darkness who spoke saying, who's my target? The man with life support smirked and said, his name is Izuku Yagi. And that's a wrap for part 2. Last time we left off with Izuku practicing his powers a bit and learning a bit about the source of his ability, and also saw a onyx-haired girl which grabbed his attention more than anything. After that we saw an injured man ordering someone to attack Izuku. Now in the story, so I just have to kill this Izuku Yagi, sir? Asked the unknown assassin. The other man replies, just call me All for One. And yes, you just have to kill him right now. He can only use a little amount of his powers, so if you make him overuse his powers he will definitely lose. I see, said the other person that he walked in front, saying, I hero killer. Stain will deliver his head to you by tomorrow. Then the figure just disappeared. By the way, I'm going to call All for One just AFO. AFO just sighed and said, now no one will stand in my way. We now go over to Izuku, who was sleeping, and in his dream he saw that girl and he was not doing anything dirty. He was just sitting in front of her and they were smiling towards one another and doing nothing else. But suddenly he was awoken by hitting the floor. He looked over to see his sister who had just pulled him off the bed saying, it's 2 p.m. how long you gonna sleep? I then stood up and walked out saying, I am going out for a walk. Izumi, I will be back tomorrow or something. I'm going to be walking around town and I will out tonight, okay? Izumi just sighed and said, Oni-chan, please be careful. Izuku replied saying, I will. Then he walked out of the house and went to the beach and used full cowl at 20% and started cleaning the beach, and then after a few hours he saw the time and the watch showed the time being 9:30 p.m. He then said, wow, I cleaned entire beach in just 7.5 hours. Thank God I had trained before. Otherwise I would have had wasted the entire 10 months on this and then would have broken myself with this quirk. Then he starts walking home thinking about that girl. He was daydreaming until he saw an onyx-haired girl with her hair styled in a black ponytail in a bookstore. He thought, the universe brought me to her. He wanted to approach her but thought he would look like a creep, but he didn't walk away. He saw her go to a limo and he also walked near it to the point he heard the driver say, Miss Yaoyorozu, is that all? The girl replied saying, yes Simon, that is all I wanted to buy, and how many times have I told you to call me Momo? Izuku got what he needed, a name to look for her. He then went back and walked to his secret spot with a smile on his face. But unbeknownst to him, a certain anti-hero was watching the entire scene and thought, He looks interested in that girl. I can use her to my advantage. Stain smirked at this thought and went off. He had a plan which he was going to execute in a few minutes. About 25 minutes later, Izuku was walking to his usual loner spot near the outskirts of the city, and by the forest he walked until he heard a voice coming from an alleyway. The person said, "She has a nice body, doesn't she?" This made Izuku run in the alleyway to find 3 people standing over a terrified girl. He looked over at the girl and saw the same girl he was always thinking about since yesterday. He ran at a man saying, "Hey you dipshit." He said this as he punched the first person, knocking him out. Seeing this, the second person tried hitting Izuku with his quirk, which made his arms into hammers, but Izuku used his infinity to stop the attack and punched the man normally and then kneed him in the face, breaking the nose. Suddenly the third man lifted a pipe and heated it up, trying to hit Izuku. Izuku, however, used infinity to stop the attack. Izuku was getting heavy-headed by using it too much, he thought. His quirk allows him to heat up objects he touches. Not good. Izuku then grabs the man's hand and hits him in the stomach and then goes for a punch, but he stopped mid-punch as he saw the man was laughing. He then looked down to see that the man had his hand near Izuku, being kept away by the infinity, but he was slowly reaching Izuku. Izuku quickly kicked the man and then punched him in the nose, knocking him out. Remember, Izuku was only using infinity as it was in self-defense and did not use full cowl. Izuku then, panting, stood up and went over to Momo and asked, "Breathe you? Breathe okay?" Momo looks up and says, "Yes, I am, thank you." Izuku then helps her up and says, "Let's go to the police station and file a complaint against these people. And BTW, weren't you in a limo, so how are you here?" Momo takes a step back and asks in a fighting pose, "How did you know that?" Izuku, putting his hands up, says, "I saw you at the bookstore and I was admiring how pretty you were, then saw you enter a limo." Momo relaxes and says, "Sorry about that, and as for your question, I was in my limo, but suddenly my limo hit something. I and the driver got off and went to look at what we hit, but there was nothing. Suddenly everything went black and I woke up in this alley with those guys looking at me, but just as then you arrived and saved me, thanks." Izuku says, "No need for that, I want to become a hero, so I guess I had to do it." Momo chuckles and then says, "Let's go before they wake up, because you look like you overused your quirk." Izuku nods and says, "I am a late bloomer and got this quirk yesterday, so I'm still working on it, and before we go let me call my dad to pick these guys, he is a pro hero." Momo says, "Okay, you do that." Izuku then looks up and says, "I sent him my location and texted him what happened. Now let's go for real." Momo and Izuku both start walking down the street talking about themselves. Izuku tells her everything about his quirk and she was impressed with such an impressive quirk. Then Izuku asked her, "So which high school do you want to go?" Momo replies by saying UA High. Izuku's heart was shooting fireworks. He then says, "Me too." Momo smiles at this and says, "Well, since we will be in the same class, what is your name?" Izuku replies saying, "Izuku Yagi." "And how do you know we will be in the same class?" Momo answered saying, "Well, I've been recommended in class 1A, and you with the limitless quirk and the stockpile quirk will definitely get in class 1. Izuku chuckled and said, smiling, "I guess you're right. So would you lick?" Before he could finish the sentence, he felt a lot of pain in his stomach. Looking down, he saw he was stabbed in the stomach from the back. Seeing this, Momo screamed. Suddenly the man steps in front of Izuku, saying, "I kidnapped you to get him to use his quirk, and now thank you for helping me. After I kill him, I will kill you too. Can't have any loose ends." Izuku looks at the man and recognizes him as Hero Killer Stain. Izuku looks at Momo, who is terrified, and says, "Momo, run." Momo instantly runs to go get help. Satin then looks at Izuku saying, "That was a mistake," and stabs Izuku in the neck as Izuku was trying to activate full cowl. Satin then looks at Izuku saying, "That was a mistake," and stabs Izuku in the neck as Izuku was trying to activate full cowl too. Then in a swift move stabs him in the forehead and multiple times in his torso, then starts walking in the direction where Momo went, saying, "After I but the loose ends I will come and take your head." Izuku, while on the floor dying, not able to say anything, is suddenly in a white void where he sees a book come to him and he reaches for the book. Meanwhile, Momo was running but trips when a kunai hits her in the thigh. She looked back to see the hero killer about to rush at her with katana in his hand, and he jumps up ready to bring the katana down. Nut was suddenly pulled back and punched in the face by a fully healed Izuku, who was laughing like a maniac while in the air. Looking like this, Stain looks up to see Izuku in the air and says, "How are you even alive?" Stain looks up to see Izuku in the air and says, "How are you even alive?" Izuku just looks down and says, "Thanks to you I learned the truth about my abilities and now you get a taste of it." Stain then looks over to Momo and throws a kunai at her face, but Izuku simply teleports in the way of the kunai and stops it using infinity and says, now no need to get hassed. He said this smiling and then says in a childish tone, I will kill you, he said that line. Like this, then rushes at Stain and knocks him out with a punch to the stomach, then collapses himself, then rushes at Stain and knocks him out with a punch to the stomach, then collapses himself. Momo then runs up to check on him and sees his wounds healed. Suddenly she hears a voice say, I am here. She looks up to see All Might with the 3 men from the alley in his hand as he says, young girl, you're hurt, quickly get on my back. The no one hero said while picking up Stain with his left hand and Izuku in his right hand. Momo got on his back as he then jumped up to get to the police station and put the 4 people in to get arrested and told them to take special care of Stain. He then got Momo checked out along with Izuku by the doctor there, and after a little while Momo's family arrived with Simon and asked if she was okay. Momo replies saying, it was all due to Izuku, she said, pointing to Izuku on the bed next to hers. Alongside Izuku was sitting Toshinori Yagi, a man Momo's father recognized in a few seconds. He walked over and said, Toshinori, is that you? Toshi looked up and said, Kenny, it's good to see you. Momo looked confused at how her father and Izuku's father knowing each other and asks, wait, you know each other? Momo's father replies saying, yeah, we were best friends since childhood. Momo then says, oh, hangs her head low and just looks sad. All Might notices this and asks, young Yaoyorozu, are you okay? Momo replies saying, oh yeah, I am just kind of sad that I didn't get All Might's autograph. All Might then stands up saying, well, give me a page and I'll give it to you. Momo, confused, gives him a notebook from her bag saying, but how will you get his autograph? All Might replies saying, don't tell anyone about this. He said this as he buffed up and signed the notebook, then reverted back saying, I have an injury which limits me, so keep this a secret, and one more thing, I only showed it to you because I am your father's friend. Momo said, yes sir. While nodding, All Might then sits down and asks, what happened? Momo takes a deep breath then says, I was in my limo but we hit something. I and Simon got off to check what we hit but we were both knocked out. Then I woke up in an alleyway with 3 people looking at me and saying that I had a nice body. Kenny hugged his daughter and said, it's okay, you are now safe. Momo calms down and continues saying, he tried grabbing me but Izuku ran in saying, hey you dipshit, and then knocked out the first person and fought the other 2 and overused his quirk. Then when we were walking here he was stabbed by Stain and Stain told me that he kidnapped me to get to Izuku and that he will cut all loose ends after killing him. Izuku told me to run. I was scared so I did so. Then after a minute or so I was stabbed in the leg and I fell down and looked up to see Stain ready to kill me but Izuku stopped him and then knocked him out and then collapsed himself. I ran up to him to check what happened. His wounds were fully healed after that you arrived. All Might then says, we will have to ask him what happened. They all look over to Izuku thinking, whatever happened, it was very drastic. POV Izuku, I opened my eyes to see that I was in a hospital-esque room. Then I looked to my side and saw Momo, my dad, and what I thought were her parents. I sat up and said, hey. They all turned towards me and were about to say something but I put my finger on my lips indicating them to stay quiet. Then I spoke saying, Dad, first off all I am fine. Hearing this Dad calmed down and sighed. End of POV. All Might after sighing spoke up saying, what happened in that fight? Izuku just smirked and said, before I say it, spoiler alert, it's gonna be epic. I don't care about the epicness of your story, just tell us what happened. Said a frustrating All Might. Izuku takes a deep sigh and speaks up saying, I think you know up to the point where I told Momo to run, right? The parents and Momo nodded. Izuku then continued saying, okay, so right after that I was stabbed in the throat and repeatedly over my body after, and a finishing blow to my forehead with a knife came soon after. Then I fell down and I was bleeding out about to die, but as I was, you can say, leaving this world and going to the afterlife, I was in a white void and there was a book. I was attracted to that book and I opened it. The book gave me all the answers about my quirk. So the reason you are here alive is due to that book? Kenny questioned. Izuku just nodded and said, now if I may, can I continue to tell what happened? Everyone just nodded. Izuku then continued saying, when I opened the book I learned that my quirk is channeling an energy from the surrounding and using it to allow me to do all the limitless stuff. My eyes not only reveal the secrets of the universe to me but also act as the conductor for that energy, and my brain uses that energy to do almost anything. I am calling this energy cursed energy. Cursed energy? All Might questioned. Izuku said, well, the energy arrives from negative emotions. For example, you don't like a shirt that is in negative emotions, so it generates cursed energy which I can use. I learned that I can create other techniques other than my limitless, but I need to work on it. And while I was in the void, I also learned if I multiply cursed energy by cursed energy, I can create positive cursed energy, and that is what I use to heal myself. And if my theory is correct, I can use the reversed curse technique to heal my mind over and over again and keep infinity open all the time. All Might was expecting something, but not this. All he could say was, "I am just glad you are okay, and I think I should introduce you to my childhood friends," he said, pointing towards Kenny and Momo's mother. Izuku said, "Aren't they Momo's parents?" All Might replied saying, "Yes, they are, but they are also my old friends. This right here is Kenny Yaoyorozu, and that is 𝗵𝗃 Yaoyorozu." Izuku burst out laughing and trying to calm himself, and after a bit calmed himself and saw Momo giving him a death glare which made Izuku gulp. He then said, "I am sorry, but when Dad said your name was 𝗵𝗃, I just couldn't stop myself." 𝗵𝗃 just sighed and said, "It's okay now, thanks for saving our daughter, and also may I ask why was she endangered to draw you out?" Izuku looked down and then up to the ceiling and then laughed saying, "Of course." 𝗵𝗃 questioned Izuku saying, "Of course what?" Izuku looked at her and said, "Well, when I was going to my secret place I saw Momo in a bookstore and I kind of kept looking at her because the thing is when I first used my domain expansion on my dad for some reason I saw her and since then she was on my mind, so it is possible that Stain must have noticed it and thought that I knew her, so he might have kidnapped her thinking that she was someone close to me." Momo perked up at this and said, "You saw me with your quirk?" Izuku nodded. Then Momo asked, in an intimating voice saying, "What did you see?" Izuku, just breathing heavily nervously and backing up, says, "I just saw you peacefully sleeping in your bed like an angel." Momo sighs and says, "Okay, but you are never allowed to see me with your quirk ever." Izuku sighs and says, "Okay, I promise," then says under his breath, "Promises are meant to be broken." All Might asks, "Did you say something?" Izuku then replies, "No, I was just mumbling about my abilities." All Might then replies saying, "Oh well, I think we should go home since you are healed." Izuku stands up and walks out saying his goodbyes to everyone and tells Momo, "I hope I meet you again in class." Momo just nods and then Izuku just walks out. All Might stands up and says, "Well, I will come to your house next week with my family, then we can talk properly." He then bows and leaves. Momo's parents look at her and says, "Well, we should also get going, and don't worry, you'll get to meet him later on and you two will also be in the same class most likely." Momo looks at her parents and smiles saying, "I really want to get to know him better, he seems like a really nice guy." Momo's parents then chuckle and they take Momo to their house. Time skip brought to you by Chubby. Momo feeding Chubby Izuku Katsudon. Izuku and All Might walk in their home, but as soon as the door opens Izuku is tackled by two green-haired women. He looked down to see his mom and Izumi hugging him. He smiled and said, "Hey, I am not dead." His mother stands up and says, "So who was dying on the road?" Izuku turns to his dad and says, "You told them?" All Might replies saying, "No, I did not. I just had called them when you woke up and muted their calls so nothing got to our side. Sorry about that." Izuku sighed and said, "Fine, but can I just get something to eat after that? I am going to train for the entrance exam, and so should you Izumi come with me tomorrow and I will train you?" Izumi nodded and walked to the kitchen to prepare something for Izuku. Izuku looked at All Might and his mom and asked, "So how long do you want to keep you two being heroes a secret?" His parents said, "Until the first day of school. That day we will tell her ourselves, and BTW don't talk about OFA with her, okay?" Izuku said, Yeah, sure, now I will go eat and go to sleep." BW, Dad, I hope you take us to meet the Yaoyorozu sometime soon." All Might chuckled and said, "Someone is excited to meet a certain girl." Izuku looked up with his mouth open and laughed a bit, then looked back down. "Dad, I almost died. I want to make at least one friend who likes me, and she is the only one besides you two that told me that I was a hero even when I was deemed quirkless. She liked me not because I had a flashy quirk but because she believed I was a good person, so yeah, I want to know her better, be friends with her." All Might and Inko smiled and said, "Okay, we will go meet them this Sunday, okay?" Izuku smiled and walked to the kitchen saying, "Okay." The family had their dinner, and after that Izuku walked in his room and slept on to the chapter. Izuku was sleeping in his and his sister's shared room. He was sleeping peacefully, but someone couldn't handle seeing the other in such peace, so she decided to pour some water on him, but it just floated above him, being an infinite distance away from him. She then decided to play blackmail. She went near his ear and whispered, "If you don't wake up and train me, I will tell Dad and Mom that you were doing lewd stuff to a picture of me." Again she got no reply, so she stood up and opened his eyes to see that he was using his quirk in his sleep. She then thinks, oh god, he couldn't even hear what I said, this idiot. She then walks out and grabs breakfast and sits with her parents and says, okay, so are we just gonna ignore that Izuku completely changed personality in the span of a day? 𝗕𝐽 speaks up saying, I know he used to stutter while talking, but since he awoke his quirk he has been different. All Might then interjects her saying, no, he was like this a few hours ago before awakening his quirk, so my best guess is he has different personality which were created from the rejection from the society and us as well. 𝗕𝐽 and Izumi just looks at All Might thinking he is right. Then All Might speaks again saying, okay, so to help him we need to know what happened to him at school with Bakugo. Izumi then trembles in fear and gulps before speaking up by saying, well, I was jealous of Izuku hearing he had such a powerful quirk and was getting dad's entire attention, so after Bakugo learned about it he was angry and said, he is useless, he has a strong quirk and can't even use it, maybe I'll just call him Deku, it means useless. After that Bakugo and I started to bully him, and the day the sludge villain attack happened Bakugo told Izuku to 𝗕𝗏𝗂𝗧𝗵𝗏. He told Izuku to kill himself. That was the moment I realized my mistake and was angry at Bakugo, so when we were talking he angrily kicked a bottle releasing the villain. All Might and 𝗕𝐽 were beyond furious at their daughter and Bakugo. All Might stood up and said, I am going to UA to inform the principal about this so Bakugo doesn't go there. He started walking but stopped as someone said, no, need dad, let him come, I will deal with him myself and put him in his place. It was Izuku who was walking down the stairs and with his green eye with a tint of blue in them. All Might stops and says, Izuku, your eyes, they reverted back, what happened? Izuku then answers by saying, well, I turned off my quirk for the most part but left a part of it on, that's why my eyes have a tint of blue in them. So if someone were to attack me I would be safe and can then strike back. And BW, let Bakugo be, please, for me. All Might was about to say something but 𝗕𝐽 stopped him and said, honey, let's trust Izuku. All Might simply nods and then sits back down. Izumi then chimes in and says, okay, so brother, now take me to training. Izuku just sighs and says, fine, let's go, the quicker the better. They were going to the door but heard a knock on it. Izuku opened the door to find Momo on the other side of the door. Izuku speaks up saying, hey Yaoyorozu, what are you doing here? Momo just replies by saying, well, you're the one who asked me if I wanted to train with you. Izuku chuckles and says, did I say that? Momo replies with a face that read, really? And said, yes, you asked me out, and not in that way, you asked me out if I wanted to train for UA with you. Izuku just sighed and said, just go. They then leave and head to 𝗕𝗏𝗏 Municipal Beach in Momo's limo. They were talking casually and learned about each other. Izumi and Momo became quick friends and Momo spoke saying, I never had any friends as people just treated me as some sort of queen or an object, and I couldn't even speak back because of my family's image. I had to put up a fake smile, but I am so happy that you two are my first friends. This made Izuku relate to Momo. Once they arrived, the limo left and the three of them were now walking towards the stairs, and the moment they reached the steps they saw a blonde teen running laps in the sand, and the blonde also noticed them and quickly came to a halt and stared at them. This made Izuku gulp and take a few steps back in fear and then falls back as the blonde had started running towards them with explosions in his hand. At the bottom of the steps, he faced his palms downwards and released an explosion to launch himself up and landed near Izuku. While cracking his fists he says, so Deku decided to use a beach which I cleaned for training, huh? Izuku was just afraid like something had just snapped a gear in his head. Bakugo grabbed Izuku's collar and was about to hit him, but his hand was being crushed by Izumi. He then turned around to Izumi and said, what the hell, Izumi? Izumi just started applying more pressure, causing Bakugo to drop Izuku. Momo then ran towards Izuku and helps him stand up and is surprised seeing how afraid he was. She thought, it's like he is another person completely. After Izuku stood up, Izumi walked over to them and released Bakugo and said, touch my brother and I will crush your 2-inch PP, understood? Then Momo and Izuku look at Bakugo, who was holding his PP in pain and nodding profusely. Izumi then let go of him and turned to look at her brother, and seeing him like this she thought, this just confirmed our suspicion. She then spoke up saying, brother, you okay? Izuku looked at her and said, why? 𝗵𝗃. Nay, Momo was shocked as to why he was stuttering, but before she could say anything an angry Bakugo rushed at them saying, you beach, why did you join him? He was about to explode both Izumi and Momo, but just before he could release his explosion he was punched in the face with green and blue electricity flying everywhere as Izuku had launched Bakugo in the sand and walked over to him. Izumi and Momo tried to stop him, but he just said, "Izumi, Momo, just stay here, I got this." Izumi and Momo, seeing him so confident, said, "Okay." Izuku then walked up to Bakugo. As Bakugo was standing up, he got on one knee and saw 2 feet in front of him. He looked up to see Izuku, who was looking down on him like he was actually looking down at him, both metaphorically and physically. This enraged Bakugo, who tried blasting Izuku, but Izuku just took the blast to the torso, and when the dust cleared, Bakugo saw Izuku completely unfazed as Izuku just said, "You can't do 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Bakugo, I am stronger, faster, more durable than you. You can't even scratch me." Bakugo got even more angry and said, "You can't hold this for longer than 10 seconds, so I just have to constantly attack you." As Bakugo did what he said, Izuku just smirked and started dodging, saying, "Oh, I overcome that limit yesterday. I can now use my energy to turn its effects backwards, essentially healing my brain as it gets damaged, so I can use this as long as I want." He finished the explanation with uppercutting Bakugo, who had his tongue out, and this caused Bakugo's jaw to close and him to bite his own tongue. At this point, saying Bakugo was made was an understatement. In fact, he was so mad that he created a few cuss words saying, "You sisterfucker, I will kill you." Izuku didn't take this too well and grabbed Bakugo by the face and threw him to the concrete wall. Both Momo and Izumi were scared by Izuku's brutality as Izuku, without stopping, rushed at Bakugo and grabbed his face again, dragging him through the wall, breaking it, and then lifted Bakugo over his head and slammed him in the dirt, knocked out. Just then Momo and Izumi ran there to check the damage and were shocked seeing Bakugo with broken bones and a bleeding tongue along with broken nose. Izumi quickly called Bakugo's mom and told her what happened. After a while, Bakugo and Yagi family arrived and saw Bakugo beat up and bloody. Meanwhile, Izuku was spot clean. They then rushed to Bakugo and tended to his wound. Meanwhile, Izuku was getting scolded by both his and Bakugo's parents. All Might spoke up saying, "This was how you were going to deal with him." Izuku just said, "He attacked Momo and Izumi, so I beat him up, and when I saw him I felt a sickness inside me." The parents then just sighed and Bakugo's mom spoke up saying, "Let's settle this by understanding the entire situation." Everyone nods, but Momo then walks up and says, "I should go, you should handle this family matter, and Izuku, we will train from tomorrow." Izuku smiled and said, "Sure Momo." Time skipped to Yagi residence. In the living room, Bakugo's mom spoke up saying, "So what happened between you two, tell us." While pointing at the 3 teens, Izumi then spoke up and explained everything, including the bullying, and Izuku filled a few spots here and there. After the explanation, Bakugo's mom was beyond pissed and said, "Katsuki Bakugo, you wanted to be a hero, right? Well, forget about it now." Bakugo just had his head down with anger that his carrier was destroyed by that Deku, but Izuku spoke up saying, "Auntie, I just want to say that let him come to you, he can no longer hurt me." Bakugo's mom was about to say something, but Bakugo's father spoke up saying, "I trust Izuku, he is a good kid, he didn't give up, and I think he can change our Bakugo, please. Don't ruin his career, he can change, just one chance." Izuku then replies, "Uncle, no need, whatever happened, let's not let it ruin the future." After the whole talk, they left with Bakugo and things were quite alright for few days until they had to go to the Yaoyorozu mansion for dinner. "Sorry for so much skipping, I am just working on a new series and am also tired. I had to work on 5 assignments today." So the family had arrived at the Yaoyorozu mansion to have dinner with the family. All Might, Inko, Izuku and Izumi were all in casual clothing, and Izumi was wondering, "Why are we wearing casual? We are having dinner with the richest family in the country." As the doors opened, she realized why they were like this. "Before you say that is stupid to wear casual clothes, let me ask you, if you are having dinner with your childhood friend, wouldn't it be like eating with family?" She saw Momo's parents in casual clothing and Momo's father fist pumping her dad and thought, "Oh, their best friend." He and his wife then looked at Izumi and said, "Hello kid, I am Kenny Yaoyorozu and this is my wife Meme Yaoyorozu, but you can call us uncle and aunt." Izumi then bowed and said, "Hello, I am Izumi Yagi." Momo then came and her dad said, "Momo, why don't you give Izuku the house tour and Izumi stay with us for a bit?" Izumi's POV. After they left, we were sitting in the living room and dad asked, "Izumi, did you notice anything weird about Izuku?" I thought and quickly told them about the day Izuku and Bakugo and how Izuku switched personality 2 times. One was when he got scared and the other when he became confident and even lost his stuttering. Then Uncle Kenny spoke up saying he has mirror personality disorder. In this there are 2 personality, one the original and the other with different aspects to the normal one. The second one is released in a near-death experience. You said Izuku is shy, timid and scared in his nature. Well then in the second he will be bold, confident and fearless, and over time the two personality will mix, giving him shyness, timidness and fear from those close to him. For example, he will be afraid of his girlfriend, will be shy with her, and meanwhile he wouldn't even fear the no one villain. The new personality that will be formed will have the best aspects of both. He will become his best version. With that, Mom and Dad were a little worried but calmed down. After a while they started talking and I left to find Momo and Izuku and heard some sobbing sounds from a room, so decided to check, and as I opened the door I saw Izuku and Momo were kissing, but broke apart after seeing me, and Izuku was in shock. He said something and then ran off, leaving Momo and me behind. I walked over to Momo and asked her, what happened? End of POV. Let's rewind a couple of minutes. Momo had showed Izuku everything in the mansion and nothing else. I had to make it clear because some people have a dirty imagination, and now had brought him to her room and opened the door. They both sat on the bed and Izuku started talking by saying, Momo, that day in the limo you said people only used you to get your money or your body and that you had to put up a fake smile every day. You also said you didn't have any friend. What happened? Momo then looked down with tears forming in her eyes. She then felt a hand on her cheek and saw Izuku smiling and saying, It's okay Momo, I am your friend, you can talk to me. I myself have experience with fake smiling and having no real friends. He then explained his life, and Momo was now crying and thinking that he had it worse than her, and then spoke up saying, Izuku, since you opened up to me, I also want to open up to you. She looked at Izuku who said, I am here Momo, you can trust me. Then Momo composed herself and started telling him how her life went. She said, It started when I first went to middle school. Before that I was homeschooled and only went to middle school because I was grown up. I also had an overdeveloped body for my age, so teenage boys were all over me, trying to get to me, asking me out and even trying to force me, and girls were jealous of me because I was rejecting everything they wanted and said that I was ungrateful, and they bullied me. I would be lying if I said I didn't want to hurt them, but I had to keep a clean image and had to smile for my family's reputation, and at their events I had to talk with rich kids who were full of themselves and even tried touching my body, but I always somehow managed to save myself. But I always feared, what if one day I wasn't able to? But when I met you, for some reason I felt safety and warmth around you. I just don't want you to leave me. She was crying and sobbing. Izuku decided to hug her and said, Sure, I won't leave you, I promise Momo, and I would never mistreat you. He then lifted her chin up with his index finger and thumb and closed his eyes and was moving towards her face. She saw him coming closer. She had experienced many people trying to do this to her, but she always pushed them away. But this time she actually moved towards the boy and closed her eyes, and a few seconds later their lips met in a soft embrace, no one moving an inch and just touching their lips and finding comfort in each other's embrace. But suddenly they both heard the gate open. They both broke the soft lip touch and looked at the door to find Izumi there. Izuku then looked back at Momo and realized what he had done and said, Momo, I am so sorry, I didn't know what happened, please forgive me. He was afraid and breathing heavily, then he ran off scared. Momo tried stopping him but he was gone. Then Izumi came up to Momo and asked her, what happened? Momo then explained everything to Izumi. And to say that Izumi was shocked was an understatement. She was setting fireworks in her brain. But then gained her composure back and told Momo, So you like him? Momo looked down and then after a few seconds whispered, I think I do. Izumi heard her and just said, Okay, and I know he feels the same, so from tomorrow I will get you two together, because he is currently afraid and I want you to get together before you, so no guy tries to get with you. Momo then chuckles and said, Thank you Izumi, you are a real friend. Izumi just bowed accepting the compliment and said, Okay, so we train and get you two together, Oka. But before she could say anything she heard her dad say, Come on Izumi, we're having dinner. Izumi then looked at Momo and they both nodded and left to get dinner. During dinner the adults were talking and Izuku took a glance at Momo, who also looked at him, and he mouthed, Sorry, I was afraid. She just smiled and nodded and mouthed back saying, No worries. He then smiled and the dinner went smoothly, and then they left for their home. Once they arrived, Izuku and Izumi were in the balcony looking at the moon, and there was a silence between them, so after a while Izumi decided to break the silence and said, You like her, don't you? Izuku just looked down and then up and said, I don't know, but I feel connected to her in a special way and just can't put my finger on it. She was the first thing I saw while using my domain, and at that moment I felt my heart drop to my stomach and butterflies left my stomach as the heart dissolved, and I don't know, but I feel empty without her. He then looks at Izumi, who was shocked and just patted his shoulder and said, "I was wrong, you don't like her, you love her, and just make sure to make your feelings clear before someone else takes her." With this she went in the room and Izuku was left there, who looked at the night sky and saw the moon and thought, "Her skin is much brighter than the moon." After that he realized what he said and thought, "I guess I love her." We covered the aftermath of Izuku and Bakugo's fight and the dinner at Yaoyorozu mansion, where Izuku and Momo talked about their past and kissed, but not a full kiss, just their lips meeting. After that, love detective Izumi questioned them both and found that they were attracted to one another, and had decided to not step in as to not ruin the natural flow of things. Now on to the story. Izuku woke up in his room. He remembered last night at Momo's house and what he did. He then rubbed his eyes and said to himself, "Ah man, how can someone fall in love so soon?" Then he remembers a book he read had said, "It only takes 8 seconds to fall in love." Izuku then chuckles and says, "Oh God, what will I do?" Then he hears a voice speak from a chair beside him say, "Well, you can start by checking whether you actually love her, or is it just your horniness speaking?" Izuku then chuckles and says, "Yeah, you're right." But then he jumps up and looks at the man while getting in a fighting stance, saying, "Who are you?" The man just raises his hand and Izuku calms down and sits back down. The man then speaks up saying, "My name's 𝗃𝗍, and don't worry, I am not here to hurt you. You see, I am from another universe. I had 2 days off from school, so I decided to come by and hang out a bit." Izuku now had stars in his eyes and he said, "Really, you mean there is a multiverse?" 𝗃𝗍 then chuckles and says, "Oh yeah, there are multiple multiverses to be exact, and they together form the Omniverse. Now each multiverse has its own creator." Izuku then realizes and gets on both his knees and puts his head on the ground, basically paying his respects to 𝗃𝗍, because he thought 𝗃𝗍 was the god since he was praying just when he arrives. Izuku then says, "My lord, forgive me that I caused you trouble." 𝗃𝗍 was just holding his laughter, but he started laughing. Izuku, hearing this, stood up looking at 𝗃𝗍. 𝗃𝗍 finally stopped laughing, but then he started laughing again because the funny moment hit him for the second time. He then calms down and whips tears from his eyes and says, "No, I am not the god, at least not yet." This perks Izuku's attention, who then asks 𝗃𝗍, "What do you mean not yet?" 𝗃𝗍 then looks at him and says, "I am kind of like God's right-hand man, so whenever he retires I replace him." Izuku, after hearing this, drops his jaw on the floor and says, "Wow, so I am in the presence of the future god?" 𝗃𝗍 just says, "Yes, yes you are. Now enough about me, let's talk about your love life." Izuku then takes a seat and prepares for the first question. 𝗃𝗍 looks at Izuku for 1 minute, then after he is sure that Izuku is ready, asks the first question. "So what happens in your body whenever you see her for the first time in the day, when she is smiling and she is laughing?" Izuku thinks about it and then says, "When I see her for the first time in the day, it feels like my heart dropped into my stomach and butterflies were released. When I see her smile, I also smile, and when I see her laugh, a part of me is mesmerized by her." 𝗃𝗍 then takes a notebook and a pen and draws a X while saying, "Not option C." Then he looks back at Izuku and says, "Listen, this is the last question which will determine everything." Izuku gulps, then nods, and with that 𝗃𝗍 asks the last question being, "What if she is happy with another man, what will you do then?" Izuku froze after hearing this question, but after a few seconds he took a deep breath and said, "I will try to find my own happiness in her happiness, because if she is happy with someone else, then I don't mind as long as she is happy." With that he looks at 𝗃𝗍, who had a smile on his face. 𝗃𝗍 then spoke saying, "Well, it's not option B either. Congratulations, kid, you're in love." Izuku, hearing this, calms down and says, "Oh, thank God. I mean you." 𝗃𝗍 just gives a oppressed chuckle and says, "In a way I am God as well, so you thanked me already." 𝗃𝗍 then stands up and stretches a bit while Izuku asks, "Wait, where are you going now?" 𝗃𝗍 just looks at the boy and says, "To another universe maybe. Maybe go back to my own, or go to another multiverse altogether, depends on the mood. But if you ever want to talk to me, just pray." With that, he vanished, leaving Izuku to deal with his problems, which were now much simpler than before. Izuku got ready, got breakfast, and saw his dad calling him to the roof. Izuku went to him and All Might said, "Bring your sister here, I think we should tell them who we are." Izuku gives him the John Cena meme saying, "Are you sure about that?" All Might just nods and Izuku goes to his sister and says, "Dad wants to tell you something, come with me." Izumi goes with Izuku and reaches All Might and says, "What is it, Dad?" All Might then says, "Izumi, there is something your mom and I have been hiding from you, and we think we should tell you." Izumi then seriously asks, "What is it?" All Might just says, "Me and your mom are pro-heroes." Izumi was dumbfounded by this and asks, "Which heroes are you?" In response to this, All Might buffs up, and this was all Izumi needed as an answer. She then says, "Your All Might and mom is Emerald," which, it is public that All Might is married to Emerald, which Izumi was blown away by this. She looks over at Izuku, who was unfazed, and asks, "You knew?" Izuku just says, "Of course I am the favorite son after all." Izumi was about to hit him, but All Might just says, "Well, you're the only son we have, and so that makes Izumi out favorite daughter." Izuku then realized how stupid he was and said, "Whatever, let's just go." Izumi agreed and said, "Yeah, we need to train." With that they left. Now Izuku and Izumi were walking to the beach when Izumi asked, "So you gonna confess to her or what?" Izuku looks at her with a tired face and says, "Nah, I will take my time. Besides, she was willing to kiss me, so she also feels something, so there is no way she will find someone else." Izumi then runs the calculation in her head and says, "You're right." Izuku then pat her back and walks onto the beach, and they started sparring. After a while, Momo also arrived and talked with the two for some time. Then they decided to do a 1v2 against Izuku. They all get in position and start the fight. Momo and Izumi rush at Izuku, and Izumi prepares to punch Izuku while Momo makes a staff to hit him, and Izuku just claps. To the surprise of those two, Momo hits Izumi while Izuku just gut punches Momo, winning the fight. The two girls gain their composure, and Momo asks, "What was that one point you were there, and the next Izumi was in your place, and you in hers, what was that?" Izuku looks at them and says, "That is a new technique I came up with. It allows me to establish the position of two objects when I clap." Momo and Izuku were amazed and said, "Wow, that's cool, but what is the name of this technique?" Izuku does a SHT eating grin and says, "Boogie woogie." The girls had a dead expression and said, "Really, that was the best you could do?" Izuku just rubs the back of his head and says, "Sorry, it is the nerd inside me." Then they all share a laugh and train more. After that they walk home at night, and Izuku and Momo were walking to her house, and there was absolute silence between them. Then Momo says something, "Izuku, about yesterday, I just want to say that it was not in the heat of the moment, and I meant that. I realized this today morning when I met Vinay." Izuku's ears perked up at the mention of Vinay. He then asked, "He visited you too?" Momo then replied, "Yes. He came by the mansion at 7:56 a.m. Izuku was shocked, saying, "He was at my house the exact same time? How could he be in two places at once? Maybe one of them was a clone or an illusion." Momo then thinks about it and tells Izuku, "He said he was God's right-hand man, right?" Izuku nodded. Then Momo continued, "Well, then maybe he is omnipresent." Izuku frowned, not understanding the term. Momo knew he didn't understand, so she explained, "If someone is omnipresent, he can exist anywhere throughout space and time at the same time. He can be in two places at once without moving. And both bodies are real, none of them are clones or illusion." Izuku took in the information, saying, "That is awesome. I hope we meet again." Momo just nods in agreement. Then at her mansion's door she says something, "Izuku, last night I meant that, so I ask you, will you go out with me?" Izuku just thinks about it, then says, "I will, but not now. After we get into you, maybe." Momo then pouts and says, "Fine, I'll wait. But don't you dare go after any other girl in the meantime." Izuku nods and salutes, saying, "Sir?" "Yes, sir," in military fashion. After that Izuku left and went to his house. Time skip to the entrance exam. "Cause I am lazy today." Izuku and Izumi were walking to the UA for the entrance. Izumi was going to take the recommend exam with Momo while Izuku was going to take the normal exam, so he went away from Izumi to the auditorium where they will have to give the written test. Izuku was completing everything using his eyes, which told him everything and also corrected the mistakes made in the test for students to find and correct. After the test, Mike was giving instructions on the practical part of the exam. Izuku went there, didn't trip, and sat in a seat front of Bakugo. Bakugo was angry, but Izuku looked back just once, and that scared Bakugo, who stayed quiet. But suddenly someone stood up and said, "Sir, on the manual 4 robots have been mentioned, but you have only explained 3. If this is a printing error, it would look bad for the school and you too." He said this while pointing at Izuku and Bakugo. "You guys are just chatting and not paying attention. If you aren't taking this seriously, leave." Izuku then stood up and said, "This guy behind me hates me, and I was just telling him to not cause a scene here, as to not disturb anyone." Ida then realizes and says, "Sorry for misunderstanding." Izuku just replies with, "No need." After that, Present Mike explains the 0 pointer, and the participants are sent to model cities to compete in the practical exam. Izuku was stretching and looking around when he noticed a brown-haired girl who was clearly nervous and decided to leave her be because if this was a real-life mission no one would have time to comfort her. Suddenly a voice came from the speaker saying, "The gates are now opening." As soon as Izuku had enough space he raced through the opening and went in fighting the robots. Everyone looked at the speaker saying he cheated, but they only got one reply, "There are no countdown in real life now Gu," as everyone ran in. Izuku was blasting bots left and right. He hit some of them with either his technique blue or red. He smashed some of them with OFA and he sometimes fired fire blast but missed every time sending the blasts in the sky. He did it until he broke his father's record of 221 points. He had also helped some people here and there so he was way over 221. Meanwhile in the observation room, "That Izuku kid is quite good," said Vlad King. All Might then said, "After all he is my son." Aizawa then said, yeah, I get it, you're proud of your child. Now focus on others as well." With that everyone started watching again. The exam went on for 15 minutes and Izuku had spent the last 9 minutes without doing anything and just texting Momo while sitting on a rooftop. Everything was going fine. They were discussing where they will go on their first real date, as every single one before has been third-partied by Izumi. He was just smiling reading the texts but he suddenly heard a loud rumble and said goodbye to Momo and stood up. He looked around for the source of the sound and then found the 0-pointer rampaging through the city. He only had one thing to say, "This is crazy, these BSRDs are F crazy." He was about to run off but at the corner of his eye he saw a girl trapped under some rubble and the 0-pointer was coming towards her so he decided he needed to save her. He jumped off the roof and rushed at the 0-pointer activating OFA. He got to the girl and lifted the rubble then clapped his hands sending the girl near the entrance with the other students and moved a piece of metal from there to where the girl was. Then he took some lightning from activating OFA and mixed it with cursed energy, allowing him to control it. He then shot the lightning up and spread it in the clouds and stared at the 0-pointer. Some students shouted, "Get back here, it is suicide." Izuku didn't listen. He just stared at the 0-pointer and when he got close to Izuku brought his hand down in a swing and lightning fell on the 0-pointer. It turned the 0-pointer to ash as it was amplified by the cursed energy. Yes, it was like Karen from Naruto but just lightning and an dragon present. Mike then said, "The exam is over." Izuku then touched all of his fingers and teleported to his house. Last time we witnessed how Izuku cleared things with Momo, how Izumi learned about her parents' jobs and the entrance exam and how he demolished it and the 0-pointer by using a move similar to Karen from Naruto but without the dragon shape. Now onto the story. Izuku wakes up in his bed and looks around seeing Izumi still sleeping in her bed. He sighs and gets off the bed and walks over to her bed and gently shakes her saying, "Wake up Izumi." But Izumi was not answering so Izuku decided to pull the sheets off her and when he did he saw that she was only in underwear and he saw that she was sweating so he decided to place a hand on her forehead and saw that it was burning. He understood that she was sick and went down to get a wet towel for her and some medicines for her. Now before you ask that he didn't care that she was in underwear, well, it doesn't matter, they are twins, they have seen each other naked for years so this is nothing. Now when he came back he gently shakes her saying, "Izumi, wake up." This time Izumi felt cold hands on her body, woke up saying, "Oni-chan, let me rest, I am sick." Izuku looked at her and said, "That is why you need to wake up. Here, take these medicine and let me put his wet towel on your forehead." Izumi sheepishly said, "Okay," and sat up taking the medicine and then laying back down while saying, "Oni-chan, I am sweaty, can you clean me up with a wet towel?" Okay, for those who don't know what it is, this is a medical thing called towel bath where someone cleans your body with a wet towel. Izuku looked at her and said, "Okay, I'll go and get a wet towel while you keep this one on your forehead." With that Izuku went away and came back with a bucket and towel and he sat beside Izumi and started to take her underwear off and started to clean her body. After a few minutes he said, "Done," and put her underwear and clothes back on and left her to rest. He then left the house and walked for about 15 minutes before stopping and looking at his right seeing the Yaoyorozu mansion. He stared at it for a good minute then he decided to go in. The guard greeted Izuku saying, "Hey Izuku, how are you?" Izuku smiled and said, "I am good Jeff, what about you?" Jeff replied saying, "As good as ever." Izuku smiled and said, "That's great to hear." With that Izuku went in and soon arrived at the mansion and opened the door and went in. He then walked towards the office and opened it finding Kenny Yaoyorozu there reading a book. Kenny looked up to Izuku and said, "Ah Izuku, what brings you here?" Izuku smiled and said, "Oh, I came here to ask Momo out but thought why don't I meet you beforehand." Kenny smiled and said, "All right, now go get your girl." Izuku then with a blush on his face left the office and made his way to Momo's room. He knocked on the door. After a few seconds the door was opened by Momo while saying, "Who is it?" But then she saw Izuku and stepped back saying, "Come in." Izuku smiled and entered saying, "So are you ready?" Momo confused asked, "Ready for what?" Izuku just walked and flopped on her bed and said, "For our date, of course." Momo was blushing right now because she had forgotten about it and said, "Right now? Didn't you say it will be after we get into you?" Izuku sat up saying, "We are already in you." Momo looked at Izuku and asked, "How do you know?" Izuku smirks and said, "The same way I look at you when you take a shower." Momo was blushing even intensely now and threw a pillow at Izuku from a chair saying, "Pervert." Izuku got hit by the pillow in the face and fell back, then sat back up saying, "Oh, I was just being honest with my girlfriend. Is it bad to JRK off to your girlfriend?" Momo then looks at him and says, "I mean, that isn't wrong, but still, you could have asked me for pictures instead of peeking." Izuku stood up saying, "Yeah, but what if someone hacked the message and the companies which run the messaging sites could be able to see it, and beside it is even appealing when it is natural and not set up. Isn't it?" He said this while walking closer to Momo and almost getting in her face. Momo was blushing more and more and said, Okay, now can I get ready for our date?" Izuku just backed off saying, "Yeah, I'm not stopping you." Momo then went to a room about the size of a normal bedroom which was made to store clothes and grabbed the dress she wanted to wear and walked out and said, "Aren't you gonna step out while I change?" Izuku just smirked and sat on the bed, one leg stretched on the bed like this, and he was also wearing just this but with his red shoes. And said, "Nah, I would rather watch you change." And said, "Nah, I would rather watch you change." Momo looked at him blushing saying, "You know, for a guy of your height you are a very big pervert." Izuku smirked and said, "Well, my pervertness isn't the only big thing I have." Momo blushed at this with steam coming out of her head and she quickly decided to wear her clothes and changed quickly. This is what she was wearing. Momo looked at Izuku, who had nosebleeds, and asked, "How do I look?" Izuku looked at her and said, "Words can't be used to describe how appealing you are." Momo smiled at this with a little blush and said, "So shall we go?" Izuku stood up saying, "Yes." Momo looked at Izuku, who had nosebleeds, and asked, "How do I look?" Izuku looked at her and said, "Words can't be used to describe how appealing you are." Momo smiled at this with a little blush and said, "So shall we go?" Izuku stood up saying, "Yes." "Okay, so let me just sum up their date quickly." So first they left the house, then went to a coffee shop, got coffee, and talked for a while. Momo talked to Izuku about how her only childhood best friend got into shiketsu. Izuku smiled saying that it is great, and then they talked more and more, and after they left the shop they went on a walk for the day, went to a lake and fed the fish, and after that they went around town, and at time around dusk they went to the beach. Izuku cleaned and sat down on the sand, talking about what their life will be like when they get into UA, and of course Momo said, "Isn't the sunset appealing?" Izuku replied to her saying, "Yeah, but not as appealing as you." After that they flirted for a bit, then it was time for Izuku to drop Momo off, so he held her by the waist and teleported to her mansion and said, "I will see you in class, okay?" With that Momo opened the door to find her father standing there. He said, Izuku, come in quickly, your family is also here. Your results came, so we decided to open all three at the same time." Izuku then just walked in with Momo following and reached the living room and took a seat in on one of the couch and took his packet and was ready to open it as soon as the other were ready, but before that he asked Izumi something. "So how are you feeling now?" Izumi looked at him and said, "Oh, I am fine, my fever went down when I was sleeping." Izuku just said, "Good, now should we open them?" The other two nodded, and with that the three ripped the packet, getting a token out of it. They pressed the button on the token at the same time, and a projection came out of All Might saying, "I am here as a projection to tell you that you Izuku Yagi / Izumi Yagi / Momo Yagi have passed the entrance / recommended and you will be in class 1. Everyone was happy, but Momo was confused saying, "Why was my last name Yagi?" As she looked at All Might, and All Might just smirked and said, "Well, you are Izuku's to be wife, so it is your name." Momo yelled hearing this, "What?" She then looked at her father and he only said one thing, "Well, you guys are to be married and BTW, the engagement is in 1 month, so be ready." Hearing this Izuku stood up and said, "Well, Dad, I think we should go, it is getting late and we should rest for the night, and Momo, I'll you tomorrow." He then started walking towards her and while walking kisses her cheeks and walked away. The Yagi family then left a steaming Momo who could rival the colossal titan in terms of how much steam she could produce. Time skip. Next morning outside Izuku was getting ready to enter the school with his sister but stopped when he heard someone call out his name saying, "Izuku, Izumi, good morning." Izuku and Izumi both greeted the person back by saying, "Good morning to you too, Momo." Izuku then walked over to her and said, "So Momo, you ready to go high school with you boyfriend?" Momo was blushing at Izuku while Izumi just rolled her eyes and said, "Oh God, can you go back to being a crybaby? That is much better than this perverted but sly fox." Izuku just laughed at this and said, "Okay, can we now go in?" As the two girls nod with that, they all head for their class, searching the corridor of the school looking for their class. After 5 minutes or so they find their class but hear loud sounds coming from the room and they look at each other asking if the other is ready to enter this mess. As they both nodded, Izuku opened the door to see Bakugo arguing with Ida, who was telling Bakugo to take his legs off the desk, saying, "This is a bad behavior for someone enrolled into you." Hearing this, Bakugo said, "Oh come on, take that stick out of your butt." Hearing this, Ida said, "Are you sure you want to be a hero?" Then Bakugo asked Ida, "Tell me, which middle school did you go to?" Ida replied saying, "I went to 𝗳𝗵𝗲 Junior High." Bakugo smirked saying, "𝗳𝗵𝗲, so you're a DM in elite, I will have fun crushing you." Ida was about to say something but heard a voice from behind say, "Oh come on, he is here as well." He turned around to find the source of the sound, finding Izuku standing there beside Momo and Izumi. So Ida went towards Izuku and bowed saying, "You are the person who destroyed the 0-pointer and scored the top scores. It is a pleasure to meet you formally, and you found the secret part of the exam, so I want to say I acknowledge you as my superior." Hearing that Izuku destroyed the 0-pointer, the class paid attention to him while Izuku just said, "No need to do that, I destroyed it because it was going to hurt someone." Then suddenly a bubble voice came from behind and said, "It's you, thundery boy." Izuku looked back, finding the source of the sound being and saying, "Ah, you're that girl I saved." 𝗬𝗏𝗏 smilingly said, "The way you called down lightning on the robot was so cool." Izuku was about to say something but was cut off by a grumpy voice saying, "If you want to make friends, I suggest you go home." Izuku looked at the source of the sound, finding Aizawa laying down on the floor in his sleeping bag and said, "Aizawa-sensei, what are you doing?" Aizawa got out of his sleeping bag and walked past Izuku over to the podium and said, "Sit down everyone." After everyone did that, he said, "It took you 4 minutes to shut up. If you want to be heroes, you're going to have to improve. Anyways, I am your homeroom teacher Shoyuta Aizawa. I will be the one teaching your class for the 3 years you are here. Now come up here and introduce yourself, and you Quirk." So the kids went and did that. It went on normally until we reached Izumi, who introduced herself and her telekinesis quirk and her enhancement quirk. After that it was Izuku's turn, who came up and said, "My name is Izuku Yagi, and yes, I am Izumi's twin brother." He looked around before speaking again saying, "I have 3 quirks, one being my 6 eyes, cursed energy manipulation, and the last being a stockpiling quirk." Everyone was shocked hearing that he had 3 quirks because most the know of people with 3 quirks was extremely rare. After they had calmed down, he explained his quirks, firstly his 6 eyes, then the cursed energy manipulation, and then the stockpile aspect of OFA. After Izuku, Momo came up and introduced herself saying, "My name is Momo Yagi, it is a pleasure to meet you all." Just as she stopped, a pink-haired girl raised her hand saying, "Are you his sister as well, because you don't look alike?" Momo just shaked her hand saying, No, it's not that. Well, how do I put it? He is my boyfriend and we have been going to get engaged in a month, so I am already using his name." The class was shocked and said, "What, you guys are going to be engaged?" While Bakugo stayed quiet, Shoto Todoroki formed the back just said one thing, "Teach." After Momo was done, Aizawa stood up and pulled out a uniform from his sleeping bag saying, "Put these on and meet me in training ground." If everyone did just that, and after 5 minutes everyone came to the field and Aizawa said, "All right, now that you all are here, we will be doing a quirk apprehension test." Suddenly Ochako said, "But sensei, what about orientation?" Aizawa just looked at her and said, "We don't have time for such stupid things now." Izuku grabbed this, "Go in that circle and throw it as far as you can." He said this as he tossed a ball to Izuku, who caught it and went in the circle first. He activated OF at 36% and threw the ball as hard as he could with that output. Then he used reversal red to push the ball even further, and when he saw the ball was losing speed, he put his hands together and summoned a bird from his shadow and told it to fly the ball as far away as it could. After 5 minutes the bird disappeared as it was too far from Izuku, and the ball fell to the ground, and Aizawa showed the result to the students, and everyone was surprised seeing the result, which was 34 kilometers. Seeing this, Mina said, "Cool, we get to use our quirks, this will be fun." Aizawa, hearing this, said, "Fun, huh? Well, how about this? Whoever gets last place will be expelled. Hearing this, most of the class fall into chows, and Uraraka says, "But sensei, we just got here, wouldn't it be unfair?" Aizawa again said, "Unfair? Aren't power-hungry villain attacking people unfair? Aren't natural disasters unfair? Everything is unfair in life except for death, because that is the only thing that treats everyone equally." With that, the class was quiet, and Aizawa said, "Now go and do the tests." With that, everyone started doing tests. Izuku went against Ida in the 50-meter dash, and at the beginning clapped his hands, replacing himself with a grain of sand on the other side of the finish line. In the grip test, he was second with a score of 456 kilograms. In the long jump, he just floated across by putting infinity between himself and ground. In the high jump, he did the same, making himself float up. In the side stepping, he just touched his fingers and teleported side form side. And in the sit-ups and push-ups, he took first place with 37 push-ups and 35 sit-ups a minute. In the end, the score was Izuku Yagi, Momo Yagi, Izumi Yagi, Shoto, Todoroki, Bakugo, Katsuki. Toru Hagakure Tori started crying, saying, "No please, I worked so hard to get here." Aizawa then looked at her and while putting the phone in his pocket said, "Oh, the expulsion part was just to get you to work harder." Everyone at the same time said, "What?" Momo then, while smiling, said, "It was obvious, I guess I should have said something." Izuku then cut her off, saying, "You're wrong. Last year Aizawa expelled everyone in his class because he saw no potential in them, but after a week he enrolled them back and they had grown a lot in that 1 week, becoming stronger than ever. I guess he didn't expel anyone because he saw potential in us." Momo then said, "Oh?" Izuku then clenched his fist and looked at everyone and said, "Guys, we are supposed to be heroes, so let's all do our best." Everyone except Bakugo and Todoroki said only one thing, "Yeah." Izuku was getting ready to go to school. It was their second day and they were going to have hero training today from All Might. Of course, Izuku, Izumi and Momo knew about this because family. So Izuku got in his uniform and went out of the room to get breakfast. While eating, Izuku says, "So, Dad, you and Mom will be taking today's hero class, right? So what will we be doing?" All Might looked at Izuku and said, "Today you guys will be doing battle training, so be prepared." Izuku replied to this saying, "Yeah." After this, the two siblings walked out of the house and walked to the school. When they reached the school, they saw Momo was waiting for them at the entrance and said, "Hey Momo, good morning." Momo looked at the two and said, "Ah, good morning you too. Ready for the heroics class today?" Izuku looked at Momo and said, "As ready as I ever will be." Momo then said, "Well, nice to hear. Now let's go in, otherwise Aizawa will be mad." The two nodded and they all went to the class. Now the entire class was normal, and the main thing happened at the end of the day when there was only one PRD or class, whatever you want to call it, was left. The students were just talking among themselves. Kirishima was trying to befriend Bakugo, and Mineta being Mineta, while Momo and Izuku were flirting. But suddenly the entire class stopped what they were doing when they saw Todoroki slam his hand on the desk and standing up. Everyone thought he was fed up of all the commotion made, but instead he walked over to Izumi and said, "Can I talk to you outside after school ends?" Izumi, being confused, just said, "Sure." With that, Todoroki went back to his seat, and this time Izuku stood up, walked to Shoto and whispered in his ears saying, "Only ask her out if you are serious about her." Shoto then turned his head looking at Izuku and whispered back saying, "I have never been more serious in my life, Yagi, but there is one problem. I am an introvert. It took me almost 2 days to just get the courage to talk to her." Izuku then let out a one laugh, but then placed a hand on his mouth and said, "Don't worry, just show her that you care and that should work." Shoto then said, "Thank you." Just then some loud footsteps were heard and everyone looked at the door, which was soon slammed open, and came in All Might and Emerald, which saying, "We are here like a normal couple." Everyone except for the Bakugo, Shoto, Izuku, Izumi and Momo were going crazy, saying, "It's really All Might and Emerald, which / they are wearing their Silver Age costume." Everyone was going crazy at this until Aizawa used his quirk and said, "Silent." With that, everyone went silent, and All Might stepped up to the podium saying, "Hello there, young heroes in training. Firstly, before we get into today's heroic class, let me introduce myself. My name is Toshinori Yagi and this is my wife Inko Yagi." Everyone were shocked, and Ida stood up saying, "That means Izuku and Izumi are your children?" All Might just looked at them and said, "Yes. Yes, they are." Bakugo was furious hearing this and stood up, but before he could do anything, Izuku messed with Bakugo's brain a little and changed his memories that he always saw Toshinori as a normal man and not a skeleton. You might be wondering how can Izuku do this well. Itadori Yuji does it multiple times. I don't know if it is his technique, but he affects people making them see a made-up past, so yeah, I made it our ability. With that done, All Might then says, so today we will be doing battle training. Everyone says, cool. And just then Emerald which says, now aren't you all forgetting something? A hero is incomplete without his suit, and presses a button which brings out 21 suitcases from the wall and says, everyone go and get your costume and meet us in City Gamma. With that All Might, Inko and Aizawa leave the room and go to the city. Soon the kids also change and get ready and arrive to the city. All Might seeing them arrive said, my, you all are looking fantastic. The kids then start bombarding the teachers with questions saying, so what will we do today? / will we fight robots again? / don't I look dazzling with my cape? / how will we do this exercise? All Might then said, calm down one at a time, but was cut off by Inko saying, you will be doing indoor battle training. No, you will just fight robots? Yes, you look dazzling. We will do this exercise by dividing 10 teams of 2 members each. Ida then raised his hand and said, but ma'am, how will the students be decided? Inko then said, well, they will be divided by lottery and one team will be the villains while one would be the heroes. Ida then said, thank you ma'am. Inko then replied, it is my job to explain this, so no need to thank me. Izuku then walked up to his dad and climbed up All Might's arm like a small child does and whispered something. Then he got off. As soon as he got off, All Might walked over to Shoto and crouched saying, you're the one who asked to meet my daughter outside, right? Shoto was now scared because he had forgotten about the talk with Izumi and said, sir, I can explain, but All Might just looked at him and said, you can't have my daughter. Shoto then shouted, what? But All Might then said, just kidding, I always wanted to say that. With that joke, All Might walked over to toe boxes and drew 10 ball and the teams were decided. The teams were as of canon, but Izumi was part of Koda's team. Now we are with the teachers and class in the observation room. Momo was looking at Izuku in a screen who was making some plan with Uraraka while Bakugo and Ida were inside the building setting up the bomb. Seeing Momo, the girl smirked and said, oh, can't take your eyes off of your boyfriend now, can't you? Momo then said, yes, I can't. Hearing this, the girls were disappointed because they thought that Momo would be embarrassed. Just then Kirishima said, man, Yagi bro has a really nice outfit. It is cool and simple. It is cool and simple. His outfit. Now on to Izuku and Uraraka. So what will we do, Yagi? Asked Uraraka, and Izuku looked at her and said, we go in, and when we reach the 2nd floor you hide while I will be a bait for Bakugo. As soon as he arrives he will dart towards me while you go run to the top floor because placing the bomb on the top floor is the go-to idea. So I pulp Bakugo while you get the biome. But Izuku suddenly stopped and looked at Uraraka and said, okay, change of plans, so I will exchange you with the bomb and you touch Ida making him float, okay? Uraraka just gave Izuku a thumbs up and said, yes. With that All Might then said, heroes may enter. Right then Izuku clapped his hands and exchanged Uraraka with the bomb, and Uraraka surprised attacked Ida and made him float and captured him. Then Uraraka contacted Izuku and said, touch the bomb and we can win, but Izuku had other plans and he said, no need, I have to put Bakugo back in his place, it won't take long. Uraraka was about to say something but Izuku threw his earpiece away and walked in. After a few seconds he heard loud explosions coming from the hall and got ready. Not long after a blast came from one of the corridor and Izuku just ducked under it and launched at Bakugo and gut punched him, but Bakugo had already launched an explosion towards Izuku, causing Izuku to jump back while Bakugo landed a few feet back and said, now Deku, prove to me that you are not useless right here and now. Izuku just laughed at this and then looked Bakugo straight in the eye with anger and said, I don't need to prove anything to you nor to anyone else. Now let's not waste time. And let's fight. With that Izuku darted at Bakugo without OFA because if he used it he would be too fast for Bakugo and jumped at him and tried to axe kick him, but Bakugo blasted himself to the side and then jumped from a wall towards Izuku and tried to punch him in the face, but he never reached Izuku's face and let out an explosion to get himself away from Izuku before he could grab his hand, and then started going backwards away from Izuku, and when he got enough distance he aimed both his gauntlets at Izuku and said, eat this you mother effer, and blasted his attack at Izuku. Meanwhile Izuku, seeing the blast come his way, clapped and swapped himself with Bakugo, and Bakugo was surprised and couldn't react and was hit by his explosions and sent through multiple buildings, and when Bakugo landed in the rubble Izuku walked up to him, put his foot on Bakugo's chest and said, this is where you belong, under my shoe, you understand? Bakugo just weakly nodded and Izuku clapped and exchanged a brick with the bomb. and touched it, whining the match. With that, All Might yelled, "The heroes win." After this they took Bakugo to Recovery Girl, and Izuku, Ida and Uraraka went to the observation room, and All Might and 𝗏𝗏𝗄 then said, "Good job kids. And now who would like to tell us what each of them did wrong and who performed the best?" Momo then raised her hand and said, "May I?" 𝗏𝗏𝗄 then said, "Yes. Go ahead." Momo then said, Izuku was too obsessed with defeating Bakugo and teaching him a lesson that he left the bomb unattended in the middle of the street, while Uraraka, after hearing Izuku left the bomb, didn't go to secure it. And Ida was trying to overacting so much that he forgot Izuku could exchange to things. So I have to say Bakugo did the best, as he was taking everything seriously and was very good at acting like a villain. That's all. Aizawa then said, "Very good explanation, Yagi. Now the rest of you go and do your match." After this the rest of the students did their class as well, and the school day ended. Meanwhile, in the other side of the city, in a bar, a man covered in hands was talking to himself, saying, "Tomorrow I break into the second most heavily guarded location in Japan." It was time when the heroics classes had ended and Izumi was waiting outside of the school for Todoroki to arrive. As she was waiting, she saw everyone leave, and once she was there alone, Todoroki came out and said, "Hi." Izumi replied by saying, "Hello." At that exact moment Todoroki said, "Listen, I am not good with people and I am quite shy and nervous around people. That is why I waited for everyone to leave, so please don't get the wrong idea." Izumi then said, "Oh, so how were you so confident in class?" Todoroki replied by saying, "Well, I had been gathering the courage to speak to you for a really long time. You might not know this, but we met at a hero convention when we were 8, and I have liked you since then, so will you please go out with me?" he said with a tomato face. "And one more thing, he doesn't have a scar, he looks normal." Izumi was looking at him with her mouth open and this look on her face. And she said, "I am sorry, Todoroki, but we can start as friends and maybe grow into something more. How about that?" Todoroki was at first sad, but when he heard "start as friends," he gained hope and said, "Yes, please." With that, Izumi smiled and said, and she said, "I am sorry, Todoroki, but we can start as friends and maybe grow into something more. How about that?" Todoroki was at first sad, but when he heard "start as friends," he gained hope and said, "Yes, please." With that, Izumi smiled and said, "Well, I guess I will see you later. BW, here is my number." She handed Shoto the paper and winked at him while walking away. Time skip. The next day. Okay, I am skipping the entire who became president of the class and the lunch scene. Instead, I will focus on Shigaraki. And in the end, we'll tell how Izuku solved the crowd. Shigaraki was standing at the gates of UA thinking, "I have to be fast, otherwise I might get caught." With that, he quickly decayed the gate without anyone noticing and entered the UA compound, triggering the alarm. So he had to move quickly. He then rushed around the UA building, avoiding cameras. He made his way to the archives and took a picture of the files in which the information about the off-campus class maintained by All Might. Seeing it, he smiles and calls someone, saying, "Gotta get me out of here," and soon he was taken away by a black mist. Just as Midnight came running there to check if anything was out of place, and she found nothing and reported back to Nizu saying, "The archives are secure." Now this is what Izuku did during the alarm. They were eating with Izuku and Momo, feeding one another, and when the alarm happened, the same things as canon happened and 𝗧𝗏𝗃 went down. So in the end, Izuku decided to trap everyone by creating energy chains and yelled, "Everyone calm the F down, it is the media." Time skip. To dinner time. Izuku, All Might, 𝗏𝗏𝗄 and Izumi were eating together at the dining table, and the TV was on showing today's news, which was, All Might reveals the identity of his children. Izuku looked at it and sighed while saying, "Well, I hope we don't face any problems due to this." All Might looked over and said, "Yeah, I hope so too." Time skip. Next Tuesday, everyone was sitting in class waiting for Aizawa. And as soon as Aizawa arrived, he looked at them and said, "Get your costumes and follow me, and if your costume was destroyed, wear P uniform." Hearing this, everyone rushed after Aizawa, and he led them to a bus and said, "Today we will be going to a off-campus site called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ, for short. Now get into the bus, and it will take about 2 hours to get there." The students boarded the bus and sat down. Izuku beside Momo while Izumi was with Shoto, and there was a pissed and jealous Bakugo siding in the back. Kaminari, while just goofing around, said, "So what is it like to have All Might and Emerald Witch's parents?" Izuku said, "Well, Dad is nice. He supported me while my mom neglected me and my sister bullied me because I was a late bloomer. I didn't have my quirk until 10 months before the entrance exam. But later I found out my mom neglected me to teach me life values. That was twisted. I ain't gonna lie, they had us in the first half." Kaminari then said, "Wow, that must have been hard." Izuku nodded saying, "Yeah, it was." Time skip. When they reached the Izuku and the class got off the bus and walked to the steps of the USJ and were greeted by Pro Hero 13, who is a she, by the way, said, "Welcome to the USJ. Today you all will do rescue training. As you all know, quirks are handy but can also be dangerous. Just look at mine, which is black hole, which sucks and destroys everything, so I had to learn how to use it. And another example is Bakugo's quirk, which can damage buildings if not handled properly. So today we will teach you how to utilize your quirk for rescue. Now follow me," she said as she started climbing the stairs. While they were climbing, Uraraka ran to her and said, "I am a huge fan, 13. I have watched you since you debuted." 13 looked at Uraraka and said, "Well, thank you, young Uraraka." With that, they all reached inside and saw Inko standing there, who looked at them and said, "Took you guys long enough. Now listen, All Might was supposed to be here as well, but he is busy right now." Izuku then walked up and said, "Did he go past his limits?" Inko nodded in agreement and said, "Well, don't worry, if anything goes south we can handle it." Now Aizawa was explaining the exercises until Kirishima said, "Hey, look, they even got fake villains." Aizawa, hearing this, turned around and shouted, "They are real villains, everyone stay calm." Izuku, seeing this, grabs 22 bands and throws them to everyone except for Aizawa and himself and says, "Wear these and stay here, me and Aizawa will deal with them." He then looks at Aizawa for permission, who just smirks and says, "Let's see how much you grew since then." With that, they stood at the edge of the stairs and saw a lot of villains come out of a portal, and then a man covered in hands with a bird-like creature. The man came out and said, Where is All Might? He was supposed to be here. Well, if he isn't here, I guess we will have to take his wife and children, I guess." Izuku looked down at him and said, "Yeah, try your best," and jumped down the stairs followed by Aizawa. They both ran at the army of the villains like Madara, and Aizawa jumped up while running at the villains and landed between them and started fighting, while Izuku rushed at them with 15% of OFA and just went straight in, fighting guys left and right while also giving Shigaraki death glares every now and then, causing him to step back. Izuku was quite brutal. He aimed for their vital points and took down the people easily. And seeing this, Shigaraki was getting agitated and started scratching himself, saying, No, Kurogyari, send the students around the day and Nomu kill that brat." Upon getting the instructions, Kurogyari went to get the students while the Nomu ran at Izuku. When Kurogyari arrived, he tried to teleport the students away but couldn't do it for some reasons and angrily yelled, "Why can't I transport you all?" Hearing this, Inko thought and said, So this is what those bracelets were for. Now that metal collar looks like a weak spot." She said this while grabbing and shocking Kurogyari with her telekinesis. Like this, and soon Kurogyari quickly forced himself to get away from the location. Meanwhile, Izuku was fighting some villains until he heard loud footsteps approaching. He quickly turned around and saw the Nomu coming towards him, so he quickly put up his arms to block the attack, but the Nomu's punch was much stronger than that and the hit broke Izuku's arm and sent him flying. But Izuku, while in the air, increased the percentage of OFA to 47% and also used the reverse cursed energy to heal himself, and lands and jumps back at the Nomu and hits it with a kick and sent him flying, and ran at it back again and kept on hitting it and sending it further and further. Then he used his blue technique and said, "Limitless blue," and pulled the Nomu towards himself, and then used red while saying "Limitless red," and sent the Nomu flying away. And when the Nomu landed, Izuku smirked and ran at the Nomu and hit it in the stomach, and then hit it in face with the backside of his right arm and launched the Nomu to his right and into the water. Then Izuku grabbed a rod and jumped up while throwing the rod towards the Nomu, hiding it in the chest and pinning him to a wall, but the Nomu removed the rod and jumped out of the water and healed his chest. Seeing this, Izuku smirked and ran at the Nomu and hit him toward the center, and then he landed at the stairs and looked around, seeing Aizawa had defeated and collected all the villains near the class, and that the Nomu was the only thing in front of Izuku. So Izuku outstretched both his hands and had his middle and index fingers stretched, and soon the blue glow appeared on his right hand and the red glow appeared on his left hand, and he said, "You can regenerate, right? This is going to be a good test subject." Then he pulled his left hand towards his right ear and folded his right hand to grab the red glow with the blue, and when the two glows mixed, it revealed a purple glow which was on the fingertips of his right arm, and Izuku said, What happens when there is ultimate convergence and divergence at the same spot? I'll tell you what happens. The thing that comes in contact with that spot is erased and torn apart from existence. Now take this. Hollow purple. Hearing this, every student and teacher there says, he's joking, right? But Izuku just flicks his right hand forward and the purple glow is released towards the 𝗨𝗵𝗄, destroying everything in its path until it hit the 𝗨𝗵𝗄 in the chest and completely destroyed everything except his head. Seeing this, Shigaraki yells, "No, you cheated. This thing was supposed to kill All Might at 100%. Izuku looked over to him and said, "One of my quirk is a stockpile quirk which is twice as strong as my father's, and now that my father is older he isn't as strong as he was before, so I can match my father with just 40% of my quirks, so yes, I can beat this monster that you created." Hearing this, Shigaraki orders Kurogiri, saying, "Get us out of here." But before they could do anything, Izuku chops Shigaraki on the neck and says, "One down, one more to go," and he then goes and kicks Kurogiri in the neck, knocking him out and capturing them both. And soon the police and the heroes arrive to the location and seize Izuku at carrying Shigaraki, Kurogiri and the head of the 𝗨𝗵𝗄 and drop them at the police and said, "These two were behind this whole thing, and this creature was made by putting more than 3 quirks into one body, and the person was already dead before they were transformed into this." Hearing this, the police took them away to a van. Meanwhile, Izuku went to his class and said, "That was fun. I needed to release some stress. Aizawa, can I engage the enemy next time as well? I like this." Aizawa looked at Izuku with a smug face and said, "Do as you like, Inko." Izumi and Momo just sighed at his actions and said, "As long as it's not life-threatening." All Might also came there and said, "Good job, my boy, you did great out there. I think I should retire already because you are already here." Izuku looked at him and said, "Nah, you can keep going. And one more thing." Then Izuku whispered into All Might's ear saying, "I may have found a way to heal you." All Might went wide-eyed and said, "Really?" Izuku just nodded and said, "But I have to improve my skills for that, so just wait about a month or two." All Might smiled and said, "That is good news. I will be waiting." Suddenly everyone heard a loud explosion coming from where the police vans were. Izuku, All Might and everyone else ran to the location to see that the van holding Shigaraki and Kurogiri exploded and there was a recorder in the middle of it. All Might went to it and picked it up and played it. A sinister voice came from the recorder saying, "Hello, All Might. I hope you haven't forgotten me. Your son captured my pupil, but I took him back. This is a message for you, All Might. Today your deepest secret will be revealed to the public, and just you wait, because this just is the beginning of the..." Everything was going fine in the world. Everything was as usual until suddenly every single screen on the planet turned black, and after a few seconds later a man whose head was disfigured and he was using a breathing machine to help himself breathe. He then started speaking, "Hello people of Earth, I am the villain's all for one." You might be wondering who that is. Well, my existence has been kept a secret by the world leaders. My quirk allows me to steal and give quirks to others, and the injury you see on my face was given to me by the #1 hero of Japan, All Might, when I fought him 6 years ago, but he also didn't leave the fight unharmed. I destroyed half of his stomach and respiratory systems that put a limit on him on how long he can do hero work, and as of now he can only do hero work for 2.5 hours before becoming unable to do anything. But this is not about his injury, this is about his quirk. His quirk, which has been a mystery for so long, will now be brought to light. His quirk isn't actually his, it belonged to my younger brother. You see, my brother had a quirk which allowed him to pass his quirk down to others, but we didn't know that, and I out of pity gave him a stockpiling quirk. Now when the two quirks combined, they created the quirk One for All, which my brother used to oppose me, but I killed him, and after that the quirk was passed on to 6 more people before it was given to All Might. Yes, All Might was given this quirk. He doesn't have a quirk of his own because he was born quirkless. And now he has passed down his quirk to his son Izuku Yagi. And just then the screen goes back to normal. Every person that saw the footage was shocked. And the heroes and world leader were in a state of panic because such a big secret of both AFO and OFA being made public would cause wide-range panic. Meanwhile, in UA, Nizu was sitting in his chair while all the teachers were sitting there thinking on what to do until Midnight spoke up saying, "I think we should cancel the sports festival and move the kids to a remote location, like 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗺𝗏𝗺𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 won't be any civilian casualties. Nizu, while still sipping his tea, says, "Yes, move all the hero course students there and I will also bring some pro heroes." We move the day after tomorrow. Meanwhile, outside the Yagi household, many reporters were swarmed to ask All Might questions, but All Might did not want to go out and face the public. Meanwhile, Izuku was just sitting there, looking at his phone and only seeing his friends' texts asking if the news was true. But he didn't reply to anyone until he read Momo's message saying, "Izuku, are you okay? Please tell me, I am worried about you." This made Izuku reply to her saying, "I am fine, just stressed. BTW, you got the news from the teachers that we will be going to a camp somewhere?" Momo replied saying, "Yeah, I got the news. I hope this thing passes quickly." Izuku smiled at this and replied, "Me too, BTW, it is true." Momo then replied back saying, "Just so we're on the same page, you mean the news about OFA is true?" Izuku just replied back with a yes. Time skip to the day when they leave for the camp. Izuku was sitting in the bus with the stares of everyone on him, but he just looked at them and said, "What?" Kirishima then spoke saying, "You could have replied to us. We were worried about you." Izuku just sighed and with a tired look said, "I am sorry, I was just tired mentally with everything and worried that someone might come after my father. He's been working non-stop to try and find All for One but to no success." Ida then put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and said, "We're here for you, Yagi." Todoroki then stood up and said, "Yes, we are with you no matter what." Izuku just smiled and said, "Thanks." Meanwhile, Izumi was just sleeping on Todoroki's shoulder, who's her boyfriend. Izuku just smiled and said, "Todoroki, please keep her safe. She is like a child, so please." Todoroki just looked at Izuku and saw fear in his eyes and said, "I will do my best, but I can't promise anything." Izuku just said, "And that is enough for me." Time skip. When the students reached the camp, everyone got off the bus and stretched, and the teachers tell everyone one thing: "All of you, go and freshen up. You all will be sleeping in a large room together for safety purposes." The students then do just that, they go and get freshen up, and at the end they all sit to have dinner. After which they all went to sleep. The next day they just studied and they all met and got introduced to each other. So class 1A and 1B met the big three, and yes, all the heroic students are there. Then when it was lunchtime, everyone was eating their food. And Shiro looked at Momo and said, "Aren't you eating a lot?" Momo then looked at him and said, "Yes. My quirk uses fat to make items." Shiro then said, It's kind of like pooping." Hearing this, Izuku laughed and genuinely laughed, not a forced laugh. Seeing this, everyone smiled until an 8-year-old kid said, "Wow, can you make something? I want to see your quirk." Momo then looked at the kid and said, "Sure, but what is your name?" The kid then said, "Koda Izumi." Momo then said, "All right, Koda, I will make you a keychain of your favorite hero." Koda then smiled and said, "My favorite hero are my parents. They are the heroes Hydro Man and Mara." Momo, hearing the names, saddened a bit because they were the heroes who were killed recently and probably. Koda didn't have a clue about it. So she smiled and tried making the keychain but couldn't, so she said, "Koda, can you please wait a little? I don't think I ate enough. When I'm ready I will come and make it for you, okay?" Koda then said, "All right, I will be on that cliff. That place gives a nice view of the place." Momo looked at the place and said, "All right, be careful." Time skip, 15 minutes. Everyone was cleaning until they heard a loud explosion, and when they looked at the direction, they saw All for One and the entire League of Villains there. All the teachers came outside and said, "Kids, go inside," and they tried to activate their quirk. But they didn't work. Even 𝗕𝗏𝗏 couldn't use his quirk. Seeing this, All for One said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, the food you had been eating had been mixed with quirk erasing powder, so it will take about a day for you to get your quirks back, but those who had multiple quirk can still use one of the quirks." Hearing this, Izuku and Shoto came to the side of their heroes, and seeing this, all the Hero Corps students also got ready to fight beside their teachers and pro heroes. And seeing all of this, All for One said, "Oh, instead of running away you are coming towards us." 𝗕𝗏𝗏 then said, "Even without a quirk we can still throw hands with you guys any day." Hearing this, All for One said, "Ha," as expected from the number 2 hero. Just then Shigaraki walked forward and said, "Aren't you pathetic?" But suddenly he was shot in the knee, and everyone looked at the culprit, who was Snipe, who had brought guns for everyone and distributed them, saying, "Never underestimate a gun in today's society." Seeing this, Izuku says, "You know I am stronger than my dad when he fought you, so you really think you will win?" All for One then laughed and said, "There is a kid on that cliff and a really strong villain is going to him. Aren't you going to save him?" Hearing this, Izuku started running away towards Koda but stopped when All for One yelled, "And as for your father, he won because something." That wasn't supposed to happen happened. Hearing this, Izuku gritted his teeth and was about to turn back, but 𝗕𝗫𝗍 yelled saying, "Go save that kid. We will handle this place." Hearing this, Izuku took off to Koda with OFA activated. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, 𝗓𝗏 suddenly held his head and everyone noticed this and were ready, but 𝗓𝗏 gained his composure and said, "Shigaraki, handle everything here," as he healed Shigaraki and went through a portal. Seeing this, the heroes got their hopes back as the strongest piece was removed from the chessboard even before the start, and now both of the queens were gone. One being 𝗓𝗏, the other being Izuku. After 𝗓𝗏 went away, 𝗕𝗫𝗍 said, "Let's go," and the heroes ran at the villains. Meanwhile, in a room somewhere with only a mirror and a bed, 𝗓𝗏 came in and took his mask off and looked in the mirror and said, "I am back finally." But suddenly a black mist appeared inside the mirror and this scared 𝗓𝗏, making him fall back, and the mist said, "Oh Kakashi, why are you scared? I am just you, Quirk." 𝗓𝗏, "Why do you reject me?" The now named Kakashi stood up and said, "Because you want to rule the world, and whenever I try to commit suicide you heal me. When I turn myself in you take over and kill all the guards. The last time I took control was against All Might, and I was only able to take control long enough to aim the hit away from his face, and I was able to save him. Listen to me, Izuku will defeat you and end you, you understand me." The mist lost its smile and then started to come out of the mirror and said, "Must be difficult having a quirk that can think and do things on its own." The mist then walked towards Kakashi as Kakashi screamed, "N," and it consumed him.